Hello, welcome back again, guys. Today we're going to take a look at using our order of operations with rational numbers. Specifically, when I say rational numbers this time, what I mean is we're going to now be putting fractions and decimals in there. I know we've done it before using whole numbers or integers. It's the same method, except now you just have a couple extra rules, because not only do you have to remember your order of operations, you also have to remember your rules for fractions as well. So just a brief review, our order of operations, you should be familiar with this, PEMDAS. You've probably got that pretty well ingrained in your brain. You'll notice I listed it as grouping symbols instead of parentheses. It can be parentheses, but it could also be brackets. The other thing you'll notice is that if you have, if it's written kind of like a fraction with the long bar, that's a division sign. It means do the top and then do the bottom, and we'll look at those on our examples. After our grouping symbols or our parentheses, we do our exponents. Multiplication and division, remember this happens from left to right, and then addition and subtraction also happens at the same time from left to right. All right, I've given us a lot of room to work these out. I like to rewrite the problem as I go, just so there's no confusion as to what I'm doing. So this is what I'm talking about with this bar, or this fraction bar, or division sign, because it wants me to do the entire top first. It also works as grouping symbols. It's saying I need to do all these operations, then divide by the operations on the bottom. All right, so I'm going to go through, and ideally that means I need to group the top and the bottom. So there's grouping symbols around them as well. So that means that I can start by just looking at the top chunk here. Just look at the numerator, if you will, of this. So I'm going to start just on the top. Here I've got an exponent and I've got subtraction. I need to do the exponent first. So we're going to solve the top, then we're going to solve the bottom, then we're going to divide. So the first thing I'm going to do is my 5 squared. 5 squared means I'm taking 5, I'm multiplying 5 times 5. Not 5 times 2, that's not what it's saying. Remember the exponents, and you can go back and rewatch those videos if you have to. Means I'm taking the base and multiplying it twice. 5 times 5 is 25. So now I have 25 minus 7 and 2 tenths. Okay? And again, I'm just going to copy the rest of my problem down because I don't want to lose anything. I want to remember that I need to do it all. And I like to rewrite each step. Otherwise, you're going to get confused and you're going to miss things. So let's finish up this top one. I've got 25 minus 7 and 2 tenths. This is one of those places where we're going to have to borrow in order to do it. So I'm going to do this over on the side. I'm going to take 25. I'm going to borrow 1 whole from it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to break that down into a fraction. Well, I know that when adding or subtracting fractions, I need a common denominator. This denominator is tenths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break that 1 down to say I have 10 tenths. If I have 10 tenths, I have 1 whole. So I've just written 25, but I've written it in a different form. So basically we're borrowing kind of like we would in regular subtraction problems, but we just have to keep our rules in mind for fractions. Remember, anything over itself is 1 whole. Now I can subtract from that 7 and 2 tenths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract my 2 fractions. I have 10 tenths minus 2 tenths, which is 8 tenths, or it will reduce to 4/5. I'm going to reduce it. Then I'm going to take 24 minus 7, which gives me, not 18, just kidding, 16. No, 17, sorry, 17. So on the top I wind up with 17 and 4/5. I've done all the calculations on the top, so now we'll go and we'll work on our calculations on the bottom part. All right, what I noticed down here is I have parentheses and an exponent. Well, I should do my parentheses first. I also have addition, that'll be last. So 2 minus 15. You can't take 15 away from 2, so remember we're going to change that to adding the additive inverse. I'm adding 2 numbers that have opposite signs, a positive and a negative, so I'm going to wind up subtracting them. So 15 minus 2 gives me 13. 15 was my larger absolute value. It was negative, so I get negative 13 there. And I'm going to write it a little bit lower so I can rewrite the whole problem because I don't want to leave anything out. So I have negative 13 plus 2 cubed. So now I need to do my 2 cubed, which means I'm multiplying 2 times 2 times 2, which gives me 8. So I have negative 13 plus 8 on the bottom. My top is not changed. Negative 13 plus 8. Now I'm again adding 2 numbers with different signs, which means I'm going to wind up subtracting their values, which gives me 5. 13 was the larger absolute value. It was negative, so it's going to be a negative 5. Now what I'm left with, and some of you probably don't like this because there's a fraction on a fraction, but remember this just means I'm dividing, okay? So now all I have to do is do my division, so I'm going to rewrite this in the way that you're used to seeing it. Hang on, let me write it up here a little more so I've got more room to work. 17 and 4/5, I'm going to change it to this type of division sign so it doesn't confuse you, all right? Now remember I've told you whenever we're dividing fractions, we have to convert them into improper or mixed numbers. We have to change them into improper fractions. So we're going to go ahead and do that real quick. 5 times 17 is 85 plus 4 is 89. So I get 89/5. Then you'll recall we have to rewrite to divide fractions of mixed numbers. We have to change it to multiplication by multiplying the inverse of our second number. Now remember we can write 5 as 5 over 1, sorry, negative 5, as negative 5 over 1. So now I can flip it and I wind up with negative 1/5. When I do that multiplication, I wind up with negative 89 over 25. And we can just leave it in its improper form, that's fine. We're going to start talking about proportions and ratios in our upcoming units, which we're not going to write as mixed numbers. So go ahead and just leave it in its improper form so that you get used to seeing it that way, and don't try to convert it. All right? So you'll notice there was a lot of steps there, but if you just break it down step by step, it's not too bad. So here you'll notice I have fractions and decimals together. Now you'll notice I have more decimals than fractions, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fraction, I'm going to convert it into its equivalent decimal form to make it easier on myself. So how would we do that? We divide 3 by 4. Now this one is one I know off the top of my head. It is 0.75. So I'm just going to rewrite this now so that it's all in decimals to make it a little bit easier on myself. All right, then you'll notice I've got my big division bar, so it's grouping the top and the bottom, so I'm just going to do my operation on the top first. What you'll notice is I'm adding two numbers with different signs, which means I'm going to wind up subtracting their absolute values. When I do that, I get 12. I want to look back at my original problem. 12.5 as the larger absolute value. That was negative, so my answer is also negative. Now on the bottom, I'm going to do my multiplication. Then once I have those two answers, I can divide them. So here I have 0.75, and I'm going to just do my work over here on the side, times 0.5. Remember, we multiply decimals, so count our decimal places. Up here, I've got 3. I need 3 in my answer. So I'm going to wind up with negative 12 divided by 0.235. Now, again, I'll do this by hand, it's fine. We're going to do our division. So if I write it the way we're used to looking at division like this, and I'm going to ignore my signs for right now, just for while we're doing our division, then we'll go back and figure out what our answer should be. Remember here, our divisor can't have a decimal, so we need to move our decimal to make it a whole number, and then we need to do the same thing to our dividend. Then we can go ahead and we can do our division. I'm going to say this probably goes in here about 5 times. Give that a shot. That's about right. You'll notice I did that in my head without using the calculator or without carrying my numbers, but if you need to carry your numbers, and that's probably what was wrong. Because look, there's no 1 there. This is why it's important to write down your steps. One time. And this is about the point where I'm going to pull out my handy-dandy calculator, because this looks like it might be a long decimal. Yes, this looks like it's a decimal that keeps going, so what we're going to do, it keeps going on and on, but I'm going to round to the nearest hundredth. We're going to call our answer approximately, and you'll notice I'm using the curvy symbol there, the curvy equals, that means it's approximately 51.9. 0.06. And sometimes you're going to get numbers that keep going. If that happens, I'll let you know what number I want you to round to. I don't expect you to keep going and going. For the rest of this, I'm going to use the calculator just to save us a little bit of time. But I did want to do some of the calculations for you to see. And I will show you in another video, I'll give you a tutorial of how you can do this using your calculator as well. All right, this one's a little more straightforward. We're dividing. We also have two different numbers that have exponents, so we want to do our exponents first. Now this one, I said I'm going to use the calculator, but this one I want to do by hand just so that we don't get confused. Because a lot of times what happens is I see kids trying to just use this exponent on one of the numbers and they get confused. So always write it out. What I'm saying is I have negative 1/2 times negative 1/2 times negative 1/2. All right, because this is what happens. You try to do too much in your head and then you get confused. So ignore my negative signs right now. I've got 1 times 1 times 1, which is 1. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. And then you'll notice the reason I kept the negative here is because the parentheses are around this, so I'm saying it's negative 1/2 and I want to multiply 3 times. So I have an odd number of negative signs, so my answer is negative. And that reminds me, I think in the last problem I didn't go back and put our negative sign back in because I told you to ignore it. I did. Remember here we also have one negative, so actually my answer was incorrect. It should be negative 51.06. That's the danger sometimes. Sometimes you should write that first. You have to find the method that works best for you and stick with it as well. Sometimes I do it in the beginning, sometimes I do it at the end. Sometimes I forget because, hey, we're all human. All right, so the first one simplifies to negative 1/8. Now I want to take 3/4 and square it. And again, write it out so you don't get confused. What I'm saying is I want 3/4 times 3/4. So we multiply our tops, which gives me 9. Multiply our bottoms, which gives me 16. So I wind up with 9/16. All right, so just always make sure that you're writing it out and you're paying attention to what you're doing so that you don't leave something out. Now I just have a simple division. Remember, how do we do division? We're going to rewrite it by multiplying the inverse. Here I notice I can simplify first. 8 and 16 are both divisible by 8. I have one negative, so my answer is negative. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 9 is 9. I wind up with negative 2/9. All right. Up here, you'll notice I use brackets instead of parentheses. So just remember, still a grouping symbol. So let's start with our brackets or our grouping symbol. I have negative 24 plus negative 16. I'm adding two numbers that have the same sign, so I'm adding the digits, keeping the sign. 24 plus 16 is 40. They're both negative. Then you'll notice I'm just writing the rest of this out because I don't want to forget to do the rest of my steps. Yes, I just tripped out of my foot. All right, now I have an exponent, so let's do that next. 2 squared gives me 4. Now I have division or addition. I want to do my division first. Negative 40 divided by 4 gives me negative 10. Negative 10 plus a positive 0.5 is going to give me a negative 9.5. And you'll notice that I didn't review all of our rules. Again, if you need more practice with the rules for adding or subtracting positive numbers and decimals or even fractions, you can go back and rewatch those videos. All right, just a couple more here. I know these ones, just one more. And sometimes you look at this and you're like, wow, that looks like a lot. Well, that's why we're breaking it down. We're doing it step by step, so it doesn't look as intimidating. So the first thing I'm going to start with up here on the top is my addition. You'll notice that they don't have common denominators. In order to add, I need to have a common denominator. My common denominator here would be 4. 1/2 becomes 2/4. So here I have 3/4 and 2/4, which gives me 5/4, or 1 and 1/4. An 8, a 3, and a 1 would give me 12. So this simplifies to 12 and 1/4. And then I'm just going to copy out the rest of this. All right, now I have 3 3/4 plus 12 and 1/4. Well, 3/4 and 1/4 is a whole. So I have 12 plus 3, which is 15, plus another 1, which is 16. Now we can take a look at the bottom, because remember, that's a group in itself. Here I have negative 2 squared. Now remember, when it's written this way and there's no parentheses around it, it means take your 2 squared and then keep that negative sign. Don't let that throw you off. You have to remember that. So 2 squared is 4, but I want to keep this as a negative 4. So I wind up with 6 plus negative 4 on the bottom. 6 plus negative 4 gives me negative 2. So what I wind up with is 16 divided by negative 2. My answer is going to be negative here, and 16 divided by 2 is 8. So again, just remember, write your steps out, take your time, make sure that you're following all the steps and you're copying down each step so you don't get confused. If you have any questions, go ahead, rewatch the video. You can rewatch any of the previous ones to help you remember your rules as you're coming into this one, because this is combining a lot of them. Feel free to ask your questions in the comments or an email, and I'll get to them in class. Have a great night, guys.